Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Health Reversion, where we look at a range of topics pertaining to physical and mental health. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at fat-soluble vitamins. Vitamins are classified into two categories based on whether they're stored by the body and how they are absorbed. Fat-soluble vitamins are dissolved in fat and are best absorbed by the body when they're consumed with foods that have a high fat content. The fat-soluble vitamins include vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K. Now, the good news here today is that your body doesn't necessarily need to replenish these particular vitamins as often as the water-soluble vitamins. And the reason for that is because your body has the ability to store any excess that it receives through the foods that you eat, through the things that you drink, through the sun that you bake in, and store those in your fat tissue. However, just because it has that ability, just because the body is able to store that in the fat tissue, it doesn't necessarily mean that all of those vitamins are stored effectively. This is the case based on the research that I've done, that vitamin K isn't exactly stored effectively by the body, and reserves of this particular vitamin can be drawn down the fastest out of all the other fat-soluble vitamins, a matter of weeks in some cases. So as with water-soluble vitamins, there's conjecture out there as to how long it can be stored for, each of the vitamins. But a quick summary for you is that vitamin K, as I mentioned before, can be drawn down the quickest, and the other vitamins can remain stored in your body for months, 6 months, possibly even a year. Some reasons that there may be a deficiency in the fat-soluble vitamins include, as I've mentioned before, alcohol consumption, which again, to reiterate, leaches vitamins and minerals from the body in order to be processed. We're looking at those strict eating regimes again, those militant eating regimes where somebody is cutting out a complete macronutrient. Any sign of malnourishment, if someone has an eating disorder or is not eating enough or keeping away from food in order to appear a particular way in terms of aesthetics. And finally, malabsorption syndromes such as Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, anything that's going to inflame the small intestine, because as mentioned before in the water-soluble video, the small intestine is the site for the absorption of vitamins and minerals all throughout the body. So if there's any inflammation, any surgery, anything impacting that area, then that's where possibly the stores have been drawn down even more, or the body just simply can't absorb it to put it into the fat cells to actually store it. One final point in relation to getting the adequate amounts of fat-soluble vitamins is related to an individual who may have low levels of pancreatic juices, they may have inadequate bile production, and that can impact the ability for the individual to actually break down and absorb the fatty food in the very first place. So if someone's heard and knows the relevance and importance of consuming fat, doesn't have to be a lot, but consuming some fat, and maybe they've decided to go overboard. I've done this. I went on carnivore, I went on high-fat diets with loads and loads of cheeses and salamis and all kinds of stuff, thinking I was doing the right thing, but it ended up just being way too much for my body. And even though I was getting all these vitamins and minerals, particularly the fat-soluble ones, I wasn't absorbing them properly, I wasn't digesting them well, and therefore it was counterproductive to increasing my levels of energy and overall health. For further information on that, have a look at the blood type series that I did earlier in 2022, which goes into a little bit more detail about how some of us as individuals are made up. So some have really high levels of stomach acid that do well with fatty foods, and others don't quite have that levels of stomach acid and bile production, and therefore won't do as well on high amounts of fatty foods. So check that out when you've got some time. Moving on to the cooking methods. So fortunately, fat-soluble vitamins aren't as affected by cooking as the water-soluble vitamins. So that's the good news straight away there. However, out of the 4 fat-soluble vitamins, it's now vitamin A's turn to take the spotlight, and it doesn't do as well with the cooking methods. its levels may deteriorate faster and further than the other fat-soluble vitamins. So the key when cooking fat-soluble foods, so for instance meat, is to look at trying to retain the juices, trying to retain the oils that leak out, because that's where some of the vitamins will go to. So if you're cooking up a steak, making sure that you're keeping as much of that juice as possible, putting it over the salad, putting it over the steak itself, mashed potato, whatever it is that you're cooking it with. And soups are really good in this respect, because with the water soluble and the fat soluble, anything that comes out of the actual produce or out of the actual meat is going to be retained in the soup. Finally, let's look at toxicity. Can toxicity take place with the fat soluble vitamins? Absolutely it can, and more so than the water soluble vitamins, which are more easily excreted by the body through the urine. Some of the symptoms that you can experience from toxicity or having too much of the fat soluble vitamins include nausea, vomiting, lethargy, so being really tired and not knowing why. And there's also some important implications around pregnancy. So if that pertains to you or someone that you know, it's important not to overdose on those fat-soluble vitamins during the pregnancy. If you got nothing out of this video, give it a thumbs down. If you got something out of this video, give it a thumbs up. Stay tuned for the episodes where I go into each of the fat-soluble vitamins. I go into the details about the RDIs, which are the recommended dietary intakes. We look at toxicity, we look at the highest foods that contain these particular vitamins so that you can get the best bang for your buck when you're out shopping. No need for supplements in most cases. So stay tuned for that and keep well in the meantime.